is just fantastic. Captain's Log, Subdates 220208.9. With the new influx of inmates mostly stemming from COVID stresses, we have decided to put all new inmates through a new military drill regimen for the first 30 years. We will then double the same regimen the moment that the inmate gets comfortable with the current drills. We will then also halve their rations. Welcome everyone to the Halls of Injustice. Today we welcome inmates number 114 to the ISO cubes. His name is Daniel Bolton, and Daniel Bolton is an absolute twat. Not just for the crime he committed, but for the level of stupidity involved. You see, there are levels of it. If you're stupid, you make a mistake. If you're an idiot, you make more mistakes. If you're an absolute effing moron, you commit a crime that has an entire planet facepalm for the level of stupidity involved, because if anything, it is a damning statement of the education system in this country. A crime so dumb that it drags the IQ of an entire nation down by about 10 points. Which, and this will certainly make sense when we get to the crime committed, I guess does mean that what he did and why he did it does mean that it possibly is a bit contagious. So for this video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Daniel Bolton. I'm going to tell you the crimes of Daniel Bolton, his evasion and summary capture, the trial itself, and of course the finale. So let us now begin with who Daniel Bolton, inmates number 114, is, beyond the obvious of him being an absolute twat. Daniel Bolton is a 30-year-old dosser from Skegness. Not much is known about his employment history, not much is known about whether or not he had any other children. What we do know is, at some point in 2019, March more notably, he had started seeing a woman called Bethany Vincent. Bethany Vincent at the time had just come out of a relationship and brought with her a child, a 9-year-old called Darren Henson, who we are going to be calling for the rest of this video DJ, as that is how he was known. While this courtship began, Daniel Bolton would walk from his hostel in Skegness to Bethany's home in Louth, which is a 28-mile gap, and credit to anyone that's that interested in somebody for walking that far. But that is as far as the credit goes, because this story doesn't exactly get any nicer. While things did start off all rosy and polite and lovely, eventually things started to unravel, and a vast amount of it stems from the fact that Daniel Bolton is a moron who doesn't understand something very simple. You see, DJ was diagnosed as being autistic, and because of his autism, Daniel got a bit apprehensive, not least because there was another child in that property, 9 months old at the time of the crime. Daniel decided things need to be shut down a bit. Firstly, we must alienate Bethany from her family. So he did that. She quit her job and became more of a shut-in. But Daniel's hatred for DJ escalated, going so far as to say in front of Bethany that he wanted to wipe out Bethany Vincent's bloodline. Just to insert this before we continue with the story, the father of DJ is Kieran Henson, and while the relationship with Bethany Vincent did break down, he would see his son on weekends and during holidays and was described as an excellent father, regardless of relationship status. And even before things started to go a bit dark, Daniel Bolton had managed to convince the likes of Bethany's own mother Caroline that he was a nice, smart lad. As time progressed, and Bethany quit her job, became more of a shut-in to spend more time with Daniel Bolton became very possessive of her. And just to be clear on something here, because I don't want to get this wrong, DJ was diagnosed as being autistic at the age of 2.5, which predates the relationship itself, but Daniel Bolton didn't know that. As time progressed, the relationship soured and it became more of an on-off relationship. There was even an incident that happened in High Holmes Street where it ended up with Daniel Bolton getting a restraining order, which then prevented him, Daniel Bolton, from contacting or being anywhere near Bethany Vincent. That didn't stop him though, because he would continue to send close to 900 messages on the weekends before the crime was committed. I know some of this seems vague. I don't exactly know what happened in High Holmes Street. I'm sorry about that. but it must have been something physical for him to then get a restraining order placed upon him. So now I think we should go through the crime that he committed. And trigger warning, it's dark. Very, very dark. On the 31st of May, Daniel Bolton made the 28-mile walk from Skegness to Louth. He would then loiter for hours near Bethany Vincent's home. The reason why? There are a few reasons. One was because Bethany Vincent was going to be moving home. With that, he would not know where she was living, and by extension, I believe he would not know where the 9-month-old child was. I am not sure if that child is his or not. None of the articles I have linked specify, but it does seem to be a motivating factor. Another reason stems back from that earlier statement of, I want to wipe out your bloodline. You see, Daniel Bolton had a belief, a rather stupid one. It can be memed online, but it will not be memed or joked upon in this video, and it concerns DJ. He believed that DJ's autism was contagious, and he didn't want to risk it spreading not only to the other child, but also to anyone else on this planet. It wasn't bad enough that DJ to him was a naughty child, but also DJ's autism to him is contagious, like the coof. The night before he went to Bethany Vincent's home, he sent her a text which read, "Nightmare on Holmes Street." On the evening when he went to their home, Bethany and DJ had a FaceTime with Caroline Vincent, the grandmother, where they had a jolly good evening discussing whatever it is families discuss. This is something that was referenced in a victim impact statement from Caroline Vincent, because shortly after that FaceTime ended, Daniel Bolton decided to kick the door in, and armed with a knife, he set upon Bethany and then DJ. Multiple times he struck, and multiple times he stabbed both Bethany Vincent and DJ. Bethany Vincent was stabbed a total of 9 times, one of which was directly through her heart. DJ ran up the stairs. Daniel Bolton chased him up the stairs. During a forensic analysis, they noted that he had run up the stairs and been chased by a man with a knife because of the injuries on his legs. Unfortunately, DJ was unable to escape. He was also beaten severely, and then stabbed 14 times, one of which the fatal one, and like his mother's, directly through his heart. Daniel Bolton then went outside into the back garden and smoked a cigarette before departing the premises. Not long after, paramedics and the police arrive, and it is then they realise this was done by one person, so a hunt begins. However, this is where things get a little interesting before the trial even begins, because they haven't got Daniel Bolton. They have to capture him first. The best part about what we're going to go through next is there is video evidence that has been released by the police of him being captured, evading, and then being caught. Sadly, not the part where he's tased. I think that, for all of us, would have been quite satisfactory. Daniel Bolton, knowing that the police are on his tail because they've got access to enough evidence to know he certainly played a part in this, runs off to the farms of Louth, and he makes the point to break in, steal food, steal clothes, but leave a note apologising for the inconvenience caused. The following day though, and this is where it gets really interesting because it just shows you how dumb he is. He approaches a lady who's walking her dog. Not far away is an off-duty police officer also walking their dog. This man recognizes Daniel Bolton and realizes he is a threat, so he calmly approaches, and a scuffle ensues. Daniel Bolton beats the officer and leaves. The officer gives chase. They fight again. Daniel Bolton stabs the officer in the leg, which is where the mistake was made. Because if anyone knows anything about harming a police officer, you know damn well what happens next. There'll be police officers from every single county swarming through that town like locusts. They will send every backup, including helicopters. And those helicopters have cameras. You see, Daniel Louth then continued. He tried to steal numerous vehicles from people and fail. He tried everything he could to escape. He then started trying to hide around farm silos, but it all ultimately failed, and eventually he was cornered. And if you're watching the screen now, you're watching him as he is about to get arrested. Daniel Louth admits he's a bad person and believes the only way forward is for him to die rather than spend an eternity in a prison. He knows that is the fate that awaits him after all. Everyone knows that. If you kill someone, a judge has to give you a life sentence. The tariff part is subjective, but what he did was malicious and with intent and definitely planned. You definitely don't walk 28 miles to then bottle it. But rather than shoot him with a gun, the police officers show him mercy and shoot him with a taser instead. Here is a picture of him as he's being walked away. He looked thirsty. He in fact did at one point ask for a cup of water from the officers. He is arrested, taken to the police station and charged with murder. Double murder, of course. Something which he denies, but he does agree manslaughter. So perhaps now we should get to the trial, because this is where some interesting mitigating factors crop up, but also other rather interesting and damning information. The charges that he was facing was murder on 2 counts, a charge which in the United Kingdom is defined under the Homicide Act of 1957. There is an argument certainly he made for manslaughter and the mitigating factors that are raised by his defense at some point. Manslaughter is a way of saying diminished responsibility. The charge of murder falls under the banner of homicide because it involves the death of a human being. So for it to be defined as murder, the person who commits the crime or is alleged to have committed the crime has to have intent and be of sound mind, which is where manslaughter creeps in during the trial because of that whole diminished responsibility argument. Daniel Bolton was subject to a psychological evaluation. During that psychological evaluation, he claimed that autopilot did the job for him, and the reason that he lost control was due to his personality disorder. Jurors were told during the trial how Daniel Bolton had a troubled childhood, repeatedly being expelled from schools, and described his father as a football hooligan who drank too much, with him holding a number of short-term jobs at amusement arcades, but had not had a job since 2019, and admitted to being a regular gambler who began binge drinking at the age of 13 and got into regular fights. 2 psychiatrists doing that evaluation agreed that Daniel Bolton suffered from a dissocial personality disorder, but the prosecution argued that he was still capable of carefully planning these killings. Daniel Bolton told defense psychiatrist Dr. Pablo Vandenabile he had arrived at Bethany Vincent's home at midday on the 31st of May, but she kicked him out and he returned later. Once inside, Daniel Bolton had begged Bethany Vincent, but she kicked him over and laughed at him, so he went to get a knife from the kitchen. Being quoted as saying, "I guess I wanted to threaten her. I wanted to Romeo and Juliet her. I probably just wanted to kill myself. It was like I wasn't there. Autopilot did the job for me. It was like she went into the knife." He then went upstairs to DJ's bedroom and continued to inflict the wounds, firstly into his temple, claiming that the initial first stabs were not him. During the trial, he was described as a manipulative and controlling man, and that his violence towards Bethany Vincent was born out of a desire to control her life and a deep sense of frustration when he did not get his own way. To support this, evidence showed he had inflicted cuts and bruises upon Bethany Vincent, along with all those messages that showed deep psychological abuse, being described as patronizing her, putting her down, making her feel small, criticizing every aspect of her life, making her forsake her family. Those are words from the judge, by the way, but we are skipping a little ahead. It was during the trial we got victim impact statements from Kieran Henson and from Caroline Vincent, with Kieran Henson saying, "I will never again hear him shout daddy. The pain and heartache kills me every day." Those are words no parent ever wants to hear, that being a reference to when the police told him his son was dead. They will be in my mind forever. So with that, I think we now need to get to the verdict and the conclusion to the story for Daniel Bolton. Daniel Bolton was found guilty of murder. Under UK law and under sentencing guidelines, a judge must impose a life sentence and then follow guidance on the minimum amount of time the offender must be in prison for before being considered for release. That is more commonly known as a tariff. The sentence is never measured on the value put on the life of the victim, ever. because to do so is a really shitty thing to do. Let's just all agree on that. So with a guilty verdict, 24 hours later, Daniel Bolton was brought back to court, where he was given his sentence. The judge had considered imposing a whole life term, but decided on something that is likely he'll never leave a prison for anyway. You see, he was given a life term, but at the age of 30, he has been given a minimum term of 40 years before being eligible to be considered for parole, which means it is unlikely that Daniel Bolton will leave the prison during his lifetime. And if he does, he'll be so decrepit, chances are he'll be living in a cardboard box just outside the prison begging to be let back in. When Mr. Justice Pepperell, the judge presiding over this, was sentencing Daniel Bolton, he said to Daniel Bolton, "You have been convicted of the brutal murders of Bethany Vincent and her 9-year-old son, Darren Henson. The only sentences I can pass by law are ones of life imprisonment." He had also said to Daniel Bolton, "You patronized her, you put her down, you made her feel small, you criticized every aspect of her life. You expected her to forsake her family, you insisted that she give up her own son, and you even uttered the most horrific threats about wanting DJ dead in her presence. I am sure that you targeted DJ because of a hatred motivated by his autism and your irrational fear that such condition would somehow affect your own son." I guess that answers one mystery. So Daniel Bolton will be serving 40 years as a baseline minimum in a prison before he may be given the opportunity to leave. It is unlikely he will. We here at the Halls of Injustice believe a whole life order is appropriate, but with that new military drill regimen being implemented on him first, along with castration. Now, as we are done, I would like to know what you all think. Please do let me know in the comments down below. If you did like the video, please smash the like. I know it's a darker topic, but it really does help this channel, even if it is to leave the obligatory comment with the word comment. I hope you all have a fantastic day and thank you very much for listening.